Alright, this is a little video on how to do something like what I did for the dragon flap, like wing flap thing. So yeah, here's that. So I've got just like these basic controls and then this thing, right? So I've got a really basic setup going. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put this and this control into offset groups, and we'll name these offset. Oop. Okay, and then this one as well. So the basic idea is oftentimes I'll make controls and I'll give them certain attributes that have driven keys to these offset groups to do things, right? But with a wing flap, the issue is that if you just have that to the offset group, then the wings are always going to be in some sort of pose throughout, like, of the wing flap animation, which is not ideal because you want them to be able to stay in their default pose sometimes, right? And this is assuming that the attribute that you use for the wing flap is like looping, It can the number for that attribute could go on off into infinity, and the animation would just keep on looping and looping. So the solution that I came up with is there's these offset groups, right? And then I'm going to create a null, so just a group. I'm going to put it at the same level as the offset group, and let's zero out all of those values. We're going to call this one flap driver group, and then we'll duplicate that and call this one flap null or flap neutral group or whatever. Alright, and then let's duplicate those, put them under this one. Rename those for the right arm and zero out their values. Okay, so now we have these offset groups that can move around the control, but then we have these ones that don't really do anything and don't have anything inside them. So what we're going to do is you're going to select these two and then this offset group and go constrained parent. Let's make sure the settings are reset and do the same for this one. Okay, so now you can take this one and you can say, okay, that's doing it, but only halfway. So now at this point I would have a separate control just like specifically for the wing flap or other stuff, but in this case I'm just going to show you straight out of this control. So we'll go attributes, add attributes, and the first attribute that we're going to add is going to be called flap effect. That's going to be a float from 0 to 1, default being 0. So now we have this flap effect. It goes from 0 to 1, and it can be in between, and we're just going to go to the animation place here and do set driven key. And we're going to load this as the driver, this control, since it has the attribute, and then we are going to load up this constraint as the driven. So now at this point we're just going to say, okay, we want to take the flap effect and we're going to tie that to these two values, which in this case we're going to say when it's at 0 we want the null group to be at full effect and the driver group to be at 0. We're going to key those, and then I'm going to bring that to 1 and just reverse these. I'm going to set a key there, and then real quick, my animation editor, I'm just going to make sure that these are linear connections instead of stepped. Okay, so now the flap effect is at 1, which means if we move the driver group, then it works at full effect, and then if we turn that off, then moving the driver group will not do anything. Okay, so then we can repeat the same thing for this side. We can say attribute, add attributes, flap effect, please. Okay. from 0 to 1, default 0, and add that. And we're going to say load this control as the driver and load this constraint as the driven. Okay, so right now it's at 0. So we need to say the null is at full and the driver is at 0. Okay, and then reverse that. 0 and 1. And if you wanted to, you could tie these attributes directly together using the node editor and like using a reverse node and stuff. But personally, I think this is just faster for what we need to do. So in this case, I like doing it this way. Okay, so now we've got that, and we can say the flap effect is at full, and let's just test that it works. Okay. Perfect. And just in case, let's test it somewhere in between. Perfect, it looks like it's working. Okay, so now what we can do is we can say, let's add another attribute. In this case, we're going to call this flap animation. No minimum, no maximum, default 0. Okay, so this is going to be the attribute that's driving our animation. So now what we can do is, in this case, I'm actually going to do my animation on this wing. I'm going to copy those animations over to my driver group. And the reason that I do this is because when I was doing it with the wings, this was a much more sure way of being able to keep my animation easily and do what I wanted with it, and easily be able to apply it and then switch that up and apply it to the other wing as well. Just when there's more controls to keep track of, I think this is a more reliable way of doing things. So we'll say at frame 0, we're going to have it at like 30 degrees. Okay, and we can key that. And then, I don't know how long we want this animation. Let's say we want it like 36 frames long. Okay, so, and then at frame 36, we want it there again, and maybe frame 18, we want it at negative 30. Okay, let's make sure that we've got this with the right tangents. Okay, so that's what our animation is going to look like. Okay, so now what we can do is we can do set driven key again. And we're going to load this control as the driver using this flap animation attribute. And then we're going to load in the driver group as the driven. And first, let's make sure that our flap effect is at full. It is. Okay, perfect. So now we can say, okay, flap animation is at 0. So now this null group, we're going to, in this case, I'm just going to do the rotate values because nothing else is really affected in this animation. And we're going to set a key here. But first we need to actually take this and copy the values here onto the driver group. So in this case, it's just rotate Z. And we'll come in here and we'll say, okay, rotate Z needs to be 30 degrees. Let's key all those and set a key. Okay, and then we'll take a look at this and say, okay, now we have another key at 18. So we should go here and we should increase this number to 18 in this attribute here. Okay, and then here we can say, okay, what is the value here? And we copy that, paste it in rotate Z, key it again, and then move it over, again switch it to 36. And we'll say, well, I just know that this is 30. Now we can key that. Okay, now we can go in here and we can take this animation, make sure that it has the tangents that we're wanting to, and then we should go to curves, pre-infinity cycle, and curves, post-infinity cycle. Hello? Okay, so now that's that's not working. Okay, this is part 2 of that video. My recording got to 10 minutes long, and my recording thing always cuts it off at that time. So the curves visually looked like they weren't doing what they were supposed to, but they are working. So we can, as you can see here, the flap animation goes off into infinity. You can just keep on going, and it's always do the flap. So now with that in place, we can easily here first let's put this to 0, and this is the way that I copied over. So I just like take all these keys, and we're just going to copy those. And this one I've set the flap effect to 0, so we can reliably just put this in here. Oh, something's weird there. Ah, I see. It's because this flap effect is here. Let's delete that. There you go. Okay, so now we've copied over the animation here, and in this one we can delete all of these keys. Set everything to 0. And then let's go to the attribute editor, add an attribute, call this flap animation. And that's it. Okay, and now we can bring up this, load the driver, and then load this group as the driven. And we'll tie it to this flap animation attribute. And we'll say, okay, at frame 0, this one is 30 at Z. So in here we'll say, do these 3, and we'll do 30 in Z. Okay, and then we can key that. And then additionally, we know that it's the same on the last frame of the loop. So we can come in here and we can set the flap animation to 36, because that's how long our loop is, and key that again. Right, and then we can take it at 18 and set the values here. So now at 18, oh shoot, did I accidentally give the values to this? That's stupid. Okay. Okay, so first at 0 we're gonna have to redo this key, because I did it on the wrong thing. As well as at 36. Okay, now at 18, we can do this value at -30, key that. Okay, and then we take these values, add the tangent that we want, pre-infinity cycle, post-infinity cycle, we trust that it works, and then now we should be able to, yep, perfect, it works great. Okay, so then we can take this one, delete all of these, return the values to the default state, and now we have these two things that can turn on and off their flap effect, and the way flap animation can go. And in fact, let's actually key these. Ooh, let's set the key here, key selected, set another one at 36, and we'll just in this case say 36, or if we wanted to, we could say 18, so that we can have the animation. Now let's go 72, so it's playing at twice the speed. And then adjust those really quick. Perfect. Now if we play it back, we got a nice and easy wing flap animation. Right, and so the nice thing about this is because this animation is on these empty groups instead of on the control themselves, that's what gives us the ability to repose this this control and say, okay, I actually want this control to be, I don't know, forward like this, and this one's going to be way up like that. So now when we play back the animation, the wing flap is still happening, but with the adjustment of the controls, however we're needing them, you know. So it gives a lot of flexibility to the animator, as well as you could come in here and you can say, hey, you know what, this wing I actually only want flapping at 0.5 the intensity. Right? So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. As far as how to do this with IK and FK, because this is just with FK here, you're just going to do the exact same process for the IK controls, but I do have a method for making sure that the animations match up exactly, and I can show you that some other time if you want to know. It's pretty simple, but yeah. Anyways, that's all.